Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the session on Scale 2.0, Startup Matrix and Strategies to Drive Impact at Scale. I'm Pavitra, the moderator for this session, with a really esteemed set of panelists, all of whom are torchbearers of the Indian startup ecosystem. Scaling is one of the most critical yet challenging aspects of building a successful startup. It is not just about growing fast. More importantly, it is to ensure that this growth is sustainable. But how do startups measure and manage their scaling journey? How do they stay nimble during this journey? And more importantly, how do they foster a culture of growth in their organizations? This and more is what we will explore for the next 30 odd minutes. Personally, I've been on the operator side and now on the VC side, and I'm really looking forward to the insights from our panel, especially because they come from a really diverse set of sectors. Thank you so much for being with us here today. I'll start with you, Hardika.
Sure.
Kinara Capital has been profitable for the last 8 years. What do you see how difficult it is to make decisions around investing in growth and continuing to stay profitable?
Thank you so much, Pavitra, and it's great to be here. Great to see everybody. We just heard the last panelist actually talk about unit level economics and profitability and growth as one of the many risks a company has to contend with, and we are no different. As a fintech and an MSME lending fintech, we know the market is very large in India. We're talking about 63 million MSMEs. We know that the demand gap for this group of individuals, proprietors, etc., is actually upwards of $500 billion. So it's never been about the market or the market demand. It has all been about the right approach. So from a Kinara perspective, the thing that we focused on, as an NBFC, we are regulated. As a regulated NBFC, there are lots of things around capital adequacy that we need to contend with. So we focused very clearly on unit level economics, because for us, if you can show the path to profitability early on and then get to the profitability part, then the rest becomes simpler. You need to run a levered business if you're an NBFC. So that means you have to go and borrow from the likes of IndusInd and others. And when we do that, one of the things they're looking for is, I've given a loan, I'm earning interest from day one on that loan, then why is it that, I'm still negative? And so I shouldn't be negative. Now that's just fundamentals of the business I operate. And so sometimes the decisions often get made around you, around what to focus on, but also within, and you talk a little bit about, how do you foster that in the company, within, how do we stay clear that profitability is important, and there has never been a better example of having selected or chosen, if you want to put it that way, profitability over growth. I mean, we have grown, but in our own way, because last 7 years have been nothing but macro events. And had we not been profitable, we would not have been able to grow at all. So knowing, nobody could have imagined all the events that came at us, and hopefully we don't have another decade of it. Don't wish that on anyone, including ourselves. But having that balance sheet, having that profitability meant that we could take the call of saying, slow down, fasten, go faster here, slow down here, rethink this, focus there. And we could have only done it because we had, we had money in the bank to do it with.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'll go touch upon another very critical aspect, sometimes absolutely crucial to growth, diversification. So Chirag, what are the factors or criteria that you consider for diversification? How do you look at diversification as a lever for growth?
Thanks, Pavitra. I think diversification is a very interesting one, especially for startups. If you're thinking about diversification, it means that something's working for you. It's no more a 0 to 1 problem because, inherently if you start to think about diversification, it means, at least for me, it means that you have a certain risk which is getting cropped up in the system, and then you want to diversify and solve for that risk. In startups, as I said, that if something is working, then day one you will have a risk in form of concentration, that you have 60% revenue from a single customer. Day one, everyone would aspire to get that customer, right? So we all would want to get that large customer. It will bring that risk, and then we'll want to solve for that risk. Similarly, you'll have one product, as it is said, all grams of the world, everyone says that focus on that one product, initially get PMF. It'll obviously lead to a concentration on that single product. Similarly, geographies, you can't build multi-country day one. So you'll have a geography risk. So all of these risks at different point of time will crop up. I think the way I look at it, first of all, is that something is definitely working. So how do we keep doubling down? And I think where it starts to get a little bit tricky or complex is that all risks can't be solved at the same time. So where, as a founder, as a CEO of the company, what one needs to think about is that what do we solve today, what do we solve for tomorrow? Because all risks are not of the same nature, not of the same degree. Example being, I have personally lived with large customers, just mitigating risks, and I'm okay with being risks. Similarly, we live in a world where technology companies, for example, all of us work with either AWS or Google Cloud. Potentially, that's a risk. Do we solve for it day one? No. We live with it probably for 10 odd years. So that's how, at least, I start to look at it, that what risk do I solve this year? What risk do I solve next year? And then it comes down to mitigation, that, how do we go about mitigating it? And in terms of, at least, in startups, I have seen that if you keep continuing the press the pedal of growth, it will typically lead to, if you have more such clients, the concentration will go down. So for example, we closely, at least in the initial years, used to track 60% of revenue is coming from how many customers, can we bring that down? So that used to be our number one metric and continues to be the number one metric, that can we bring that concentration down? And as we move ahead, we have looked at, for example, we have still not looked at geo as a risk, because we are one long India, and we believe we continuously look at the market share number that way. And in my previous journeys also, for example, if I look at e-commerce world, we have always had this debate of that we have huge dependency on Facebook, Google as advertising channels. Now, how do we reduce that? But I think, I would not say anyone has solved it, but we have learned to live with it. Probably some amount of affiliates have come in. So I think more than, one is that calibrating those risks, and then also understanding that some of those are not solvable or should not be solved day one. And then whatever you want to solve for, then there are, various different mitigation strategies you can use to solve for them.
Yeah. No, I really liked the insight around risk prioritization overlaying on top of diversification. Really makes a lot of sense. We have Apoorv with us, and Apoorv, you've been at the helm of technology with large organizations before you chose to start your journey at Refyne, and you're leading technology here now. And one of the critical things that I'm sure all the startups face is, how do you build for scale and yet ensure a fast time to market? And you see this more often than not in your growth phase. How do you, go about making these decisions?
Yep. Thank you. Great to see everyone, and great to be among such great colleagues here. In terms of starting up, first thing is you have to figure out whether technology is the core of what you're trying to build. If it is not, then I don't think that should be your core focus to begin with. In that case, you have identified that the problem statement you're trying to solve it's not necessarily centered in technology. Technology is a key enabler, and it will continue to be throughout the ecosystem. And it will be a big, massive impact in pretty much anything it touches. I see technology as, being an engineer at heart and a developer at heart, I can still say that technology is a tool at the end of the day. What you're trying to solve for will always be out there in the world. So when you're starting, the first thing you have to realize, is it the core engineering problem that you're trying to solve? If that is your differentiator, yes, that's where a lot of your focus should be. More often than not, that's not what happens. And so whatever I'm going to say will apply more in an ecosystem where you're trying to solve a real life problem and not necessarily a core engineering problem. For example, if you're building a very, very hardcore AI algorithm, the rules of the game becomes very, very different. Whereas if you're trying to start up a company, this has been common knowledge and common wisdom in the industry, which everyone understands. You have to get the product out first. So you cannot wait for building the right kind of system, the most scalable thing. Yes, there are certain non-negotiables. For example, when Refyne started, we knew that we would be operating in the fintech ecosystem. So security and compliance were the non-negotiables. So whatever we do, these are the invariants that we will have to qualify at every single step. So we solve for that, and there is an overhead definitely associated with that and slows you down accordingly. But again, non-negotiables, certain industries might not have similar set of non-negotiables, so they can move a lot faster. But the first thing you have to do is get the first version of the product out without keeping scale necessarily in mind. I have seen a lot of companies pump in a lot of money into technology. Technology is an expensive ecosystem. People are very highly paid for a good reason, but it's an expensive ecosystem. Building a proper tech ecosystem takes time and money as well. So first you have to figure out whether you have solved a business problem, whether you have that basic product market fit in place, and then comes the idea of inflections. So any tech ecosystem typically goes through points of inflection. The first point being that you have to go out there, you have to be in the hands of customers, get the customer feedback first. Next, what I call the generation 2 product. This is where you start building for scale a little bit. And typically what I've seen is that you end up with a Gen 3 product. Gen 2 is where you make a lot of mistakes. So first version, it's designed to be shut down at some point, and it's designed for failure. So you know that the first version that you have built is not there to sustain you through the Series D or whatever IPO, right? The second version is where you take a shot at that, where you actually build the ecosystem. But again, burnt my hands there. It's almost impossible to predict what the scalable version of the system looks like. So you have to continue building anyway, and this is where a lot of second generation is where a lot of chaos happens. So you are trying to build for scale, so you're not as flexible as before, but you're still learning about the ecosystem. So the ecosystem keeps coming up with new and new challenges. Once that gets sorted out is when you look at the Gen 3 product, where you have a lot more stability.
I really like the candor with which you shared your insights, Sabu. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Nishant, you're of course playing in the edtech space, and how do you see product-led growth actually fueling the growth of an organization, and one moving away from a pure sales-led growth to a more structured product-led growth of sorts?
Yeah, so product-led growth has been really important for us because we have usually been a completely online edtech player. So our product is all we have to showcase. And if you have great product-led growth, what happens is that the customers come primed into what they want, what they need from you, and what they can usually get out of your product. So there's then not a lot of sales or conversions involved. With high ticket size, you still would have admission counselors or someone to actually guide you through the processes. But so yeah, product led is very, very, very important. As an organization scales, what starts to happen is that marketing, branding, these things start becoming very important. Earlier you were saying that my product is phenomenal. Now you are saying that we stand with the potential that India has. So you get broader because you want millions of people are listening to you and you want to attract them. So as you scale, brand and marketing and things like that would become an important part of growth. But the most important thing there is that those functions should be talking to each other and should be very, very aligned to each other. Even for the companies that have sales, the major problem occurs when the promise and the sales actually starts to diverge from each other very quickly. And though sales is very obvious, that even happens with brand and marketing and stuff like that. So product, brand, marketing, sales all have to go hand in hand very, very quickly.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And in fact, it brings to my next question. Somewhere it is closely linked to the organizational culture, teams being aligned to the same goal. I'm going to ask you, Adarsh, huge team, 1800 odd people, right?
Yeah.
As the organization grows, how do you ensure that each employee is working towards the common goal? How do you really seep in the culture into the entire organization?
Yeah. So it's a very nice question, right? It's a very universal question, universal word, right? Culture has been in last 2 years, if I can recall. So interesting fact, I was sharing with someone today, right? Culture, the origin of world culture is from agriculture only, cultivation, right? So anyways, being from agriculture background, culture is the integral part of DeHaat, right? We have been very serious about this word, right? Culture and values. Personally, I am right. The current team size is around 1846, right? Because I am taking care of HR function. That's why I know the exact number. The current number is 1846. And if I will talk about data, so in last 2 years, we have onboarded 65% of our Janta, right, workforce. So that was a humongous task, how to, right, sustain, maintain the culture you have built since 2011, 2012. That was a very difficult job, right? And it happens, what we feel, it happens only when there should be, right, physical presence of founders with everyone. It's very important, especially in the sector like us in agriculture, right? Our 80% Janta are on field. They are on district level and below that, at panchayat level, right? So they look after you, they look upon you कि यार founders क्या कर रहे हैं, है ना? You will have to demonstrate it. Otherwise, it's very difficult, right? You will just keep preaching, ये culture होता है, ऐसा होता है, right? But it's very difficult to go down at that level. So what we do apart from regular steps, right? So obviously town halls, business calls, ये सब virtual calls होते हैं. At least we are very fortunate. We are 5 co-founders, right? And we ensure our 14 days, right? Physical presence at district and below, right? At below level. हम लोग 5 लोग, all 5 of us, just we used to spend our time और अलग-अलग locations पे, right? At least that gives lot of confidence to people like who are doing, it's a very difficult job, right? Just to motivate them, you will have to be there, right? And other side is, when we go to field, we get motivated, right? जब हम जब लगता है कि demotivate हो रहे हैं, then we go to, कुछ नहीं टिकट कराया भाग जाते हैं फील्ड पे, right? बिहार में चले गए, MP में चले गए, वहाँ एकदम लिटरली जाके आप सोर्सिंग करो, सोयाबीन उठा रहे हो, फिर से आप मोटिवेट हो जाते हो, right? When you see people delivering agriculture inputs on literally in flood area, right, on boat, और वो फैंसी बोट नहीं होता है, लकड़ी वाले जो बोट होते हैं उस पर जाके वो डिलीवर कर रहे हैं इन दिस हीट वेव. अभी मानसून कितना एल नीनो इफेक्ट है, राइट? यू हैव सीन दैट. पीपल वर सोर्सिंग प्रोडक्ट इन टेम्परेचर लाइक 50 डिग्री सेल्सियस. बोलते तो यार 15 बस दिखा रहा है, टेम्परेचर इज नॉट लेस देन 55 डिग्री सेल्सियस. सो इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू be there, right, on the field. And I have a very good example, right? Obviously, again, you can't be there physically present all the time, but there is one guy, I am just giving an example. There is one guy, we call him Arunji. He joined us in 2012, right? He was 10th pass. मतलब आप समझ लो विलेज स्कूल से था. He was just अंगूठा छाप illiterate person. He joined in 2012. हम लोग 2000 रुपये बोले कि 2000 ही दे पाएंगे, फिर भी वो आ गया, right? He joined us. 2019 तक our operations were very concentrated in Bihar, eastern part of UP. तो हम एक ही जगह रहते थे, काम करते थे, एक ही रूम में रहते थे. And he was with us. After 2019 when we got funded first time, उसके बाद 1-2 साल में उसने 3 बार रिजाइन किया. एंड द मेजर रीजन वाज कि सर आप लोग टाइम ही नहीं देते हो, आप लोग से मिलना नहीं होता है, राइट? सो अगेन अब हम उनके साथ तो रह नहीं सकते हमेशा, राइट? वी ट्रैवल लॉट. बट अभी लास्ट सीजन में, राइट, वन ऑफ द फाउंडर वॉज इन फील्ड. बोले कि अब बताओ अरुण जी, मतलब अब तो आप मतलब 2 साल से सॉर्टेड है आपने, मतलब कोई प्रॉब्लम कोई शिकायत नहीं है, व्हाट इज मतलब क्या है, व्हाट इज द ड्राइविंग फोर्स? बोला सर अब है ना सर, अब क्या है ना सर, अब आप लोगों को हम नहीं देखते, अब देहात को देखते हैं, देहात अब बहुत बड़ा हो गया है सर, राइट? So that is something we मतलब we got motivated है, this is something we outcome we need this, right? So yeah, obviously we are doing lot of things, right, but it's still way to go.
No, thank you. That anecdote was, I think, so powerful in itself and clearly highlighted it's not just the founders who motivate the team, right? It's how eventually the culture and the team motivates and keeps the founder going as well. So, yeah, Chirag, I'm going to come to you next and just GoKwik's recent partnerships with Flipkart, ANS Commerce, Cred, they've been significant milestones, not just for you, but I would say for the industry as well. What is the role of partnerships, you know, in your organization's growth strategy, or what do you think generally is the role of partnerships in the growth strategy?
Yeah, I think I've also on the way realized the importance of partnerships and internally also debated a lot that how partnership can be a great moat, you know, when you're starting to think about platforms, businesses. And I'll separate probably these into two, that one is starting to think that what all things we should build and what all things we should do it with partners, because it also means that you have to part away some revenue with partners, right? So it's an important decision that why do you want to do what exactly, and it also comes at a cost of experience, that now you are not able to provide that experience, partners will provide. You need to ensure that will they be able to provide the similar kind of experience which, let's say, if you were to build in-house. So, and I think we've been consciously, you know, day one thinking about it that at least internally we would call it that we want to build for 80% of use cases of merchants who would use it 80% of the time. Otherwise, we would not build. So, however, merchants would not look at it that way. Merchants would want us to build many things, right? They would want to treat us like a services company, not like a product company, and come back with requests. So we took a conscious call that, you know, let's do these 80% things which merchants would want at 80% of the time, and open up the whole platform so that other things are still possible. We would still want to deliver those things to the merchants, but we'll part away with that revenue and enable some of the other agencies and ecosystem to deliver that. That's been our thought process, and I'll come to the second part which you asked me, some of these large partnerships. I think that's a very tricky one. You know, if you ask me if I was starting up again and would I go and do some of these large partnerships, I would not, you know, say that I should be doing that. Why? Because I think when you're starting out now, it is very hard for a new emerging startup to go out and convince a large Flipkart or a large Cred, because their priorities are very difficult. You can move at a nimble pace, they won't. It's very difficult. And you know, you banking on them, that itself is a huge risk. So, and it will also come back to the previous question you asked, that even if they agree, then it'll come back with some amount of risk, you know, which you would have to over time diversify. Day one, we have also, you know, consciously never gone out to, you know, go and partner with some of the large companies. And I think the way it has happened for us is that we have had very internal objective driven matrices that, you know, we want to affect these metrics, first build distribution, and then when you are at scale and you want to, you know, improve your matrices. For example, we believe that for one of our products, rewards is one of the large matrices. And then we looked at it that, okay, which are the players which we should go out and partner. And then, you know, we knew that these partnerships are not going to be easy. And by the way, for us also, it takes 1.5 years to get them realized. And also, you know, making them believe that it's going to work for them also, so that they are interested, they move. We would do these massive POCs, which could give them enough confidence. That's how we've gone about it. But otherwise, you know, if you ask me if I'm in the pre-PMF or early PMF stage, I would not advise anyone to go out and do some of these large partnerships. These are to be done when you are at the super scale stage and really trying to make it big. That's the stage to go at.
Yeah, makes complete sense. Nishant, let me maybe delve slightly into the matrix. Like, you know, in a large organization, how do you build a matrix-led? And when I say large, I'm basically referring to the growth stage. Beyond PMF, you're now in the growth stage. How do you build a matrix-led organization? Do you focus more on the input matrix, or do you know, single-mindedly just look at the output matrix and drive them?
Sure. So I think as you grow, metrics become very, very important, not just because the internal functions want to evaluate their own progress, but there are multiple functions, multiple leaders, all wanting to know if the company is growing well, if the function beside them is doing their good job or not. So metrics become super, super important. An important thing is for a top level metric to be owned by a single leader. That's one of the most important things that we've realized, because if that ownership is distributed, often things slip through the cracks. So metrics are important. They should be owned by a single leader. And in terms of input and output metrics, I think output metrics are super important, because that's how you know where you're going. That's your compass, that's your North Star. But input metrics essentially tell you how reliable your processes are. Is it because of a macro that you're growing? Is it because of a superstar performer? Is it something that happened because of something you did? But when you have an understanding that this input metric, this input lever can increase my output lever, then you know that you are on a path where you can predict what will happen 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, 2 years down the line. So I think it's a very strong and tightly coupled combination of input and output metrics.
Yeah, really practical input there, I would say, to be executed day in, day out. Hardika, in my introductory question, you referred to the macroeconomic changes and the market dynamics. I would really like this conversation to go on, but I have to make that my last question and be that the closing note as well. 12 years in a sector which, of course, was operating amidst all of these changes, right? What do you think is critical for an organization to continue growing in an environment which is so dynamic and influenced so much?
Yeah, I would say probably 3 things that come top of mind. Number 1 is focus on the customer. Through this 12 years and in our journey early on, I mean, we talk about 2016 demonetization, 2017 GST, 2018 ILFS, 2019 DHFL, 2020 COVID, and then COVID wave 2, right? I mean, every year there has been something that sort of upturned everything before. The thing that became critical and important for us, and what we think we did a very good job of, is stay focused on the customer. So the one thing we can be sure of is that we have unwavering support and focus on that MSME customer from day one to day to day and probably into eternity. And I would say that as people think about what you're doing, I know that startups are all about pivoting, but please be, I mean, in my opinion, focus on the customer, the person or the group that you're servicing, and working with that goes a long way, because they will also partner with you as you go through these challenging times, because they're also going through the same challenging times. That's number 1. Number 2, I would say, is compliance. So you touched on this more from a tech regulatory, tech security point of view. I would say compliance across the board. We are in a highly regulated environment. We are one of 300 systemically important NBFCs that gets heavily regulated by the RBI, and we're also debt listed, so we get regulated by SEBI. But I will tell you this, that that culture of being on the right side of all of that is critical up front. It isn't like code. You cannot refactor it after the fact. So it must be something that you build up as part of the organization. And so as when all of these events happen and there are new policies and new regulations, being on the right side of all of that, through even at the cost of growth, even at the cost of profitability, even at the cost of other elements in your business, I do think is tremendously important from a DNA of an organization to build out, especially if you're working in spaces that are highly regulated or adjacent to spaces that are highly regulated, because then you will get regulated. And then the third and the last thing I would say is, staying the course. The macro events you cannot predict. And you have to find for your organization, for your startup, with your founders, if you have more than one, a collective understanding of what you're grounded on, what is important, and what, as an organization, keeps you in place. It's like Going to the gym. We all want to lose, I want to lose weight. I'm sure there are others in the group here who want to lose weight. We can all start today, but we will all have different journeys. And we cannot compare each other because we have different biodynamics, bodies, options, structures, food habits, whatever. It's the same thing for organizations. So you have to figure out for yourself what is your path as an organization and what keeps you grounded to move to that path and not get caught up in the larger comparative element that comes in, and the ecosystem is very large that we all operate in, but we have to center ourselves somewhere in there. So those are my three.
No, absolutely. On that brilliant note, absolutely. Stay centered, stay your own course, and keep the customer at the helm of every decision that you make. Thank you so much, all of you. It's been such an insightful discussion. I wish we could go on. Thank you so much for having us here today for this discussion. Hope you all have a great evening ahead.
Thank you so much, Pavitra, for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you.